Well, good afternoon. Good. There we go. Okay. So we'll discuss Java FX over the next couple of weeks. And a reminder, when Java first came out, they used something called Abstract Windows Toolkit, or AWT. Everybody hated it. They went to Java Swing. Many people hated it. Now they're on Java FX. People it seems to be a pretty good reputation. I don't hear that many people cussing and moaning about Java FX. We're taking a couple weeks because the way this works is you create a GUI, but then you also have to create the ability for the GUI to talk to the rest of the program. So this week is just about creating the GUI, but they don't do anything yet. There's no capability for user interaction yet. And then next week we'll get into user interaction. So module outcomes, as usual. Convince yourself that you've got these by the end of the week. Before we go into the details of how Java FX works, let's talk about the model view controller pattern. A pattern is a software structure that occurs repeatedly in the OO world. And you can Google Java patterns. There's, I forget, maybe 23 or so different patterns. This is the model view controller pattern. And the idea is this. The thing that you're seeing on the screen, remember, is not the actual thing. It's the view of the thing. So if you remember in the sheep-sheepdog example that we've been dealing with, I have sheep objects and dog objects and terrain objects. And those are the actual real live sheep and dog and terrain. Those are the actual objects. And then we need to represent those on the screen. So the sheep get represented with white circles and the dog gets represented with the gray circle. And those are not the sheep and not the dog. They're the view of the dog. So you have this underlying data representation of something. You have this underlying mathematical representation of something. These are the objects and classes that you're designing for in your case, for your project, but also for the homework series, the Hound and Hare series. And then you have the things that are displayed on the screen, which are the view of those things. They are separate. It's tough to get buy-in from that until you go through the process a couple times. Now, those two things are separate. You need some way to manage those, or you need something to control them, and that's what the controller is. What happens is the user interacts through the GUI, and then the GUI calls on the controller to go do something to the model, update the model. So the controller is constantly saying, okay, model, now change. And then in order to update the view, the controller will inform the GUI as to how it needs to change to show the user what gets updated. So the basic loop here, you're presenting the basic view, the current state of the objects to the user on the GUI. The user does some kind of an interaction. It's going to be a button press, a button click, a keyboard press, filling out a text box, something. And then that kicks off the controller to say, okay, the user has requested something. And so model, you need to do something. And the model will do whatever it does, which changes its state. And then the controller will report back to the GUI and say, okay, now show the user the updated situation. Bottom line, the thing you see on the screen, not the thing. Are we not happy? There we go. Okay, so for the sheep-sheepdog game, again, I showed this notional GUI a while ago, and I said those white ovals were sheep. They're not. They're not a sheep. They're a view of the sheep. The gray one is a view of the dog. The pen is not a pen. It's a view of the pen. The actual sheep, dog, terrain, pen are in the model. So our model, as we discussed last week when we were talking about UMLs, looks like this, where we've got the generic animal and the sheep extends the generic animal, and the dog extends the generic animal. The sheep and the dog, let's go with the dog. The dog has an XY location. That's where the dog is. What you see on the screen is supposed to be some kind of a representation for that. You're going to notice this in your Hound and Hare when you'll be creating the Hound and Hare GUI as part of your homework assignments. And the field of play for the Hound and Hare game is bigger than you can show on the screen, if I recall. If you just did one-to-one pixels, it wouldn't work out. So you have to do some kind of a scaling in order to make that work. So that's kind of an indication to you, again, that the model will have certain values, and then you present that view on the screen. The controller is really intimately tied to the GUI, so it's kind of hard to get the controller fully out of the GUI phase, because what happens is, let's say you click a button, or let's say you do a key click, an up arrow or a left arrow to move the dog around in this case. That's something that happens through the GUI, but then the GUI will tell the controller, hey, this is what the user wants you to do. And then the view is just all the actual GUI classes. So what we're going to do this week is really focus on the view, and then next week we'll focus on how do you get the view and the model to talk to each other through the controller. Now we can talk about JavaFX. So there's not much to talk about. The best thing to do is to do examples. And quite frankly, as I always recommend, the best thing for you to do is to look at the software, run the software, modify the software, break it, fix it, that kind of thing. So the software that we're talking about today and Wednesday, most of it is up online already, and I'll make sure that all of it gets up online by the end of the week for sure. It'll probably be tomorrow or Wednesday morning. JavaFX is built roughly around the notion of an analogy with a theater. So on the theater, your top level element is the stage. Inside the stage, you can put various scenes. And from there, the analogy breaks down a little bit. The scene can actually be broken up into separate viewing areas called a pane. And then inside the pane, we have these entities that are just generically called nodes. And the nodes can include buttons, text, images, text field boxes, drop-down boxes, menus, other panes. You can put panes within panes. But you've got this whole notion of container. A stage contains a scene contains a pane contains text and images and maybe other panes. So this notion of one inside the other. And I have my recommendations for how you should create this, which, as always, you can take my advice or ignore my advice, but I have a process by which I try to create these things in order to minimize confusion. We'll show that as you go through building more sophisticated GUIs, there can be a number of GUI elements, a lot of lines of code that are just boring as heck because all they're doing is placing buttons and placing text field boxes and things like that. So it gets really cluttered in terms of code. So in order to minimize the confusion, I recommend that you find a process that works for you and then go through with the process. Okay, this slide just expands on the nodes. Even though we say a stage contains a scene and a scene contains a pane and a pane contains nodes, since a pane can contain other panes, and we'll talk at length about that on Wednesday, then a pane is also a node. So that's why I put the pane under the node category. There's a bunch of different panes: grid pane, stack pane, flow pane. They're all children of the same generic parent. They all have slightly different behaviors. Yes, we have code examples for each one. Everybody almost certainly in your program will use a border pane. And then depending on putting things on the side, on what you're doing for your controls, a lot of people will use an H box, which is a horizontal box, or a V box, which is a vertical box. But you may find other things are useful towards you. To get familiar again with the idea of a pane, just look at the screen right now. This is PowerPoint. I doubt that it was programmed in Java, but maybe it was. I don't know what language it was. But if you look at the whole screen, that's the window. And then if you get rid of the top ribbon here where it's with all these widgets, right? That's not part of the window. That's part of this scene. And then we have several panes. Over here, I've got my slide navigation menu. That's actually one of the panes. And then I've got the actual display where I can edit these things. That's a pane. I've got the ribbon up here. That's a pane. So there's at least 3 panes inside of this. The ribbon is also broken up into smaller areas, which may be smaller panes. So that's the thing that we're talking about, where panes can contain other panes. And then the other nodes are things that you might think of more naturally, like a text or a label, which is oddly enough, Java has text and labels, where a label is just providing text. Or a text field where users can enter their text, or a button users can click to make things happen. An image, sliders, drop-down boxes, menu boxes, things like that. So again, in this example, the stage is the entire window. This is an actual example from the code that we'll look at this week. The stage is the entire window, and it includes the title and all of the widgets that you would expect on a window machine window, the minimize, maximize, close buttons. And then inside here is the scene, and it only has 1 pane. And then there's labels and rectangles, label, rectangle, and more rectangles. All of those are nodes within the scene. And we have code for that we'll look at on Wednesday. So with that in mind, with those 2 key things in mind, the first thing being that you have this notion of a model view controller. The view on the screen is not the thing. You have an underlying mathematical model. And with this notion of this stage, scene, pane, node, right? Stage contains a scene contains a pane contains a node. With those 2 things, we can move forward and look at code. The code looks like this, and I'm not going to spend much time on it because I'd rather work through it with the examples, but I will talk about this process. I say, in my mind, my process that I like to make all my nodes first. I work from the inside out. I make all my nodes first. Then I make the pane or panes, and I add the node to the pane. Then I add the pane to the scene. Then I add the scene to the stage, and then show. I'll get into this extending application and start instead of main in a minute when we're actually looking at code. This particular code is this. And what happens here, let's see, let's go through the components. First of all, yes, you will have import buttons or import statements. You have to import all the GUI elements. Now, in a sophisticated GUI, you'll have a fairly long list of these import statements. You'll have a dozen of them, maybe more. I'll talk later on about how you can break that up and make it less visually cluttered if you need to. And then, let's see, I said stage, right? Okay, so we have a stage. That was imported. The stage contains a scene, so you import that. Normally a scene contains a pane, but this specific example skips that. So it goes right to the node, which is the button. And then if you look, I create the button. By the way, all of these are variations on the original code that came with the textbook. I was not pleased with how the textbook did theirs because they were not consistent and I thought it was confusing. So I used these as a basis and then reworked them a little bit. Anyway, I create this node, which is a button. Then I create the scene and I put the button in the scene right there. When you create the scene, you say, here's what I want inside of it. And the 400, 500 is the horizontal and vertical size of it in pixels. And then I set scene, so I put the scene inside the stage, and then I do this show method, and that's what actually puts it out on the screen. So you build the whole GUI, and then you push it out to the screen. And create the node, put the node in the pane, create the pane, put the node in the pane, put the pane in the scene, put the scene in the stage. That's a standard process that you'll see me do over and over and over again. Now let's talk about some of the things that look a more weird and bizarre here though. First of all, we said we needed a stage. That makes sense. The stage controls a scene, contains a scene. The scene contains a button. So that's those three import statements. What's this application import statement? Well, that's the top level for all of the GUI stuff. And you need that because every GUI you make is an extension of application. So I'm doing this FX01 Hello World extends application. If you look at your project requirements, I say that you must have a justifiable case for inheritance that is not related to the GUI. And that's why I had to put that caveat in here, not related to the GUI, because you cannot make a GUI without extending applications. So we have inheritance right off the bat. So the first thing that looks odd is we extend application. Now application comes with a method called start. And so we override start. By the way, this @override is a tag for the compiler. It is not necessary. You do not need to do that to override your methods. It's your choice. I don't care if you put it in there or not. So we do public void start. Now here's what start is doing. Start now takes the place of main. I can see some reasons why they did that. It is a little confusing when you first enter the GUI world because you're so used to public static void main string args, and now it's public void start stage primary stage. So everything's happening inside of start. Start ends down here at line 29. So it doesn't take that long to create these things. Create the button, create the scene, put the button in the scene, and then put the scene in the stage. Now, why didn't you have to create the stage? Because the start method gives you for free a stage called primary stage. You get that for free. Can you create more than one stage? Yes. If you want to create additional stages, you can do that. And I have examples of that too. So that's all that's happening here. This is nice and simple because it's a hello world. Create the button, put the button in the scene, put the scene in the stage, and away we go. Now, like I said, start replaces main. Unfortunately, depending on what system you are in, depending on what tool you are using, not all systems will recognize start as the beginning of the program. So that's what's going on down here, and that comment makes it clear. So you put main in anyway. I recommend doing this all the time. Code defensively. Code in such a way that your code is as robust as possible. You don't know who's going to get this and where they're going to run your code. Code runs fine on your machine. It won't run on my machine. Turns out the reason is main is missing. That's going to hurt your grade, right? So code defensively, protect yourself. All main is doing here is it runs this launch args method, and launch args will launch the application. All right. How does this thing look when it runs? It looks like this. And remember how we put the button in a pane and not in a scene? Well, what that resulted in is the button took up the entire scene. So this is ridiculous. It's a button. You can see I'm clicking it. I'm clicking the button. Now we haven't told the button what to do when we click it, so it's doing nothing. But that's how you create your first basic Hello World GUI. Questions at this point? Okay, let's change this a little bit. Let's put the button in a pane. Basically the exact same thing, except now I create the button, I create the pane, I put the button in the pane, we'll get back to that. I create the scene and I put the pane in the scene, and then I put the scene in the stage, and then I show it. So all we've done is added the pane. By the way, pane equals new pane. Scene equals new scene. That's a very common formula in Java GUI. When I first encountered it, I was not thrilled at all, but it is culturally correct. And so I've kind of given in and keep doing that. As a rule, you're going to have more than one button. My recommendation is always name it what it does. For a button, I start out with BT. A lot of people do that. That way, when you have a whole bunch of nodes and you're just looking through your code, as soon as you see BT something, you know it's a button. And if this button actually did something, I would name it what it does. BT, initialize simulation. BT, run analysis, whatever. Name it what it does. And the same with panes. You can have more than one pane, and you won't name them all pane 1, pane 2, pane 3. You're going to name them what they are. Navigation pane, whatever. Now, the way you add something to a pane is by this odd little syntax down here. Get children, parentheses, add, and then the name of the thing you're going to add. So I always recommend, even if you only have one button, create it separately, give it a name. If you don't give it a name, you can never get a hold of it again. Name it. Name everything that's on your GUI. You'll see some examples where people just create a button in place there. I recommend against that. And if we run this, now we've put the button in the, oh, I gotta get rid of this. Now we've put the button in the pane, so there it is. It's a normal looking button. Now, why is it up in the upper left-hand corner? Well, I didn't say where to put the button. So what Java defaults to, as usual, if you don't default values, then their value is 0. So it put the button up at the 0, 0 position of the scene or of the pane. Now, it may seem odd to you that the upper left corner is 0, 0. All of us that took algebra and all the follow-on courses know that the origin should be down here in the lower left corner. But if you use the origin for a graphic entity in the lower left corner, and then people start changing the window size, it moves your origin around, which is disconcerting. So look at what's the only thing that's not moving here? It's the upper left corner. So click on the button. So the origin is in the upper left corner, and it's plus X goes to the right and plus Y goes down. Sometimes I'll have students, they'll say, I made a button and I can't, it's not making the button. It's not showing up on the screen. I know I made it, but it's not here. So why didn't it make it? And after I look at their code, I'll say, oh, you did make it, but you put your button like up here. You know, you put your button way above the stage, or you put your button way to the left of the stage, or, you know, way off to the right. So be aware. Plus X is to the right, plus Y is down. Sometimes that means you have to do a little bit of conversion of your math. Again, because the thing you're looking at is not the thing, right? So you have to do some conversion with the, make sure that what you're showing actually makes sense. For example, when you do the GUIs for your hound and hare balloons, if your balloon goes up, that's a positive Y value. And a bigger positive Y value will actually put your balloon further down on the screen. So you have to do some conversion to account for that. Now, here's the button in the upper left-hand corner. That's probably not where you want it. Can we fix it? Of course we can fix it. So on the third, I actually put the button in a reasonable location, right in the center. And again, it's a real button, it operates. Click me. I haven't yet told the button what to do when it gets clicked, so that's why it's not doing anything. So how did I do that? Exact same thing. I made the button BTOK, blah, blah, blah. But then I did this, BTOK set layout X and BTOK set layout Y. So it's in the X location from the upper left corner, it's 175 pixels to the right. And from the upper left corner, it's 200 pixels down. And yes, you will spend hours laying out your GUI. When you do a more sophisticated one, I strongly recommend, I'm going to say this a lot, I strongly recommend taking out a sheet of paper, drawing out your GUI, labeling the elements. As always, plan before you design.
Is the scene numbers 400, 550, are those like general numbers that we'll all use? Or
They're
is that
numbers, yeah, they're just numbers that I made up to show a reasonably sized window.
so ours can be anything?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the original one, it was like 50 and 100, and it was this teeny little box. And I was like, I don't like the teeny little box. I want a window that actually looks like a window. You know, it was like just big enough to hold the button. By the way, the button is this long. How long is it? It's long enough to hold the word, click me. It defaults to that. What if you wanted the button to be longer? Could you do that? Absolutely. What can you do with a button? Well, use your, Google, and always Google Java FX. So if you Google Java FX, here you go to the Oracle help pages. They're very helpful. This is the Oracle help page for the button. And first of all, look at this is a trace of genealogy. The absolute most primitive ancestor is the object, and then node extends object, and parent extends node, and region extends parent, and control, on and on and on, and finally you have button. So button extends button base. And then the way these are laid out, they give you basic simple examples. Oh, click me, what do you know? I didn't even realize they did that. And then they give you a summary of the properties and the methods. Now here's the thing. Properties inherited from, properties inherited from. We haven't discussed too much about properties, but look at, these are all these different properties that you can have. And then there's a constructor, different forms of constructors. And then we get into the methods. And wow, there's a lot of methods. Look at all the stuff you can do with a button. Set padding, set border, set center, position area. Most of the ones that you're going to want are going to be on something. Look at them all. Get on mouse drag over. In other words, if someone just drags the mouse over the button, you can have an action that will get something. But it's the ones you want. On mouse pressed. Oh, okay. So if someone presses the button down with the mouse, they press down on the mouse over the button, you can fire an action. And then when they release, you can have another action. The one that I think we want, I always forget. That's why I always go to these things. It's not set on key press. It's, I'm looking through all the sets. It might have been set action, set accessible, set blend mode, set accessible. I thought it was on action, but it might be from another area too. So,
is it set on mouse clicked?
You can use that, but I think there it is. It's on action. That's what I wanted right there. That's the one you'll use the most. Now, you can also use set on mouse click, but on action is intrinsically tied to the button press. And again, you can see there's, I don't know, there might be 200 methods here. I've never counted them. In your entire life, you're going to use 5 of them, or 3 of them. But this set layout X, set layout Y, that's pretty common for almost all the graphical things. Let's see if we can find it. Control F. Set layout X, there it is, set layout X and set layout Y. And if you click on these, it'll tell you, oh, here's set layout Y, blah, 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 here's how you use it. So the Oracle help page is a little intimidating when you first go into them, but they are helpful. And they tend to give you examples of what to do. Other tools that are helpful, because again, I promise you, you're going to Google stuff when you're doing your GUI. Other tools that are helpful are Tutorials Point and W3 Schools. They give just good basic things. And you can find tutorials specific to JavaFX. As usual, what's the one, the website, Hacker, name escapes me right now. The Hackers Point, whatever, which has, it's a discussion board where people are always asking, how do I do this? How do I do that? That one can be helpful. The only thing I found with that though is some people, when they answer questions, are trying to show off how clever they are and not just giving you a good straightforward answer on code. So that's you know, find sources that you like. Okay, yeah, and the values that I'm using in the code, 175, 200, 455, absolutely arbitrary. You're going to do what makes sense for you. You know, normally I would want something that fills up more of the screen so I can have more real estate to work with. For basic Java, they do allow the primitive elements, circles, lines, text, rectangles, things like that. You do not, I promise you, you do not want to try to build a beautiful 3D ray traced scene using these elements. So for this course, you really just want to stick with, you know, the basic things, and that's pretty much all everybody needs. Like you've seen how sophisticated my sheepdog game looks. I could actually code, you know, I could actually make that code without much trouble. When you get done with this course and you actually understand object-oriented programming, if you still want to do some beautiful graphics-driven stuff, then you use other tools. You would use other software that's built for that, game developer engines, model developers, Blender, Unity, things like that. But for now, we can stick with the simplistic elements just to learn how to do GUI stuff and how to use this model view controller paradigm. Okay. I just want to walk through a couple of applications. And again, me walking through this is helpful for initial explanation. But again, please go unload that zip file and play with these things, compile and run them. I compile and run in the console. They'll work there. If you do go in Eclipse, so it's a word of warning, Eclipse initially will probably not let you run JavaFX stuff, which I always thought was weird. But if you take your error message and Google it, there's a series of steps. Basically what happens is all the FX stuff is in a particular library, and Eclipse defaults to not giving you access to the library. So I forget what button you click on Eclipse, but you click a button, it opens up the libraries, and then you click on the library that you want to be available to you, and then all the GUI stuff will work. And again, if you just literally take your error message and throw it into Google, you'll get those steps. Dean may have that in one of his labs too, I'm not sure. Okay, so here we're going to make a circle. And it's the same thing as you would expect with a button. I have to import the circle, so I import the circle. And so I say, okay, I make a brand new circle. Circle, circle equals new circle. And then we set center X and set center Y. Set the radius. How do I know these things exist? I'm just Googling examples. Again, I got this from the author's example, but I'm Googling the examples. And then I get these odd set stroke, set fill. Well, the stroke is the line. So the line that makes up the circle is the stroke. So all the rectangles, all the shapes will have a set stroke method. And then set fill, which is the interior. And the set fill was null. I don't even know if they needed that. Set fill is null. If set fill is null, then that means it's transparent. There's literally no color in there. Now, what may seem odd to you is this. I want to make this stroke. This one is blacks, colors dot black. And I actually had to import color as an object because we're in an object-oriented world. I had to import the color in order to use that. And it's color.black, all capitals. Remember what all capitals means. It means it's a constant value. So this is a constant value. Okay, great. I can use black. I wonder what other colors there are. You know, back in my day, we had green and light green. Right? That was the or amber and light amber. Then we got 16 colors. Ooh, and now we're up to more than that, right? So, okay, what colors are there? So again, Google Java FX color. It'll bring you to the Oracle color page, and it tells you all about the color. And some examples, and then they start with these colors. And just like it was all capital black, there's black. Whoops, there's all capital black. But man, look at all these colors. Corn silk, dark cyan. It looks like you're going through the paint center at Home Depot or Lowe's. Forest green, floral white, not just white, floral white. Okay. So I could have put in here, what is it? Ghost white. Okay, let's do ghost white. This should work. If this doesn't work, oh well. Oh, I'm sorry. And let's do the fill. Whoops. Has to be capital. Goldenrod. Save it. Compile it. Let's see what happens. Oh, I color dot. And then if we show the circle, let's see, can I get up there? There's my circle. So play with these things. Yeah, I like blur. All right, so this circle, let's see, how did we get that? We said, okay, I create my nodes first. So I create the circle, set the center X, set the center Y, set the radius. And again, these numbers are completely arbitrary. Color blue, no. And then I build a pane. I add the circle to the pane using this interesting get children add construction. And then I add the pane to the scene. And again, these numbers are arbitrary. And then I set the title, I set the scene, and add the scene to the stage and show. So again, you build the nodes, add the node to the pane, add the pane to the scene, add the scene to the stage. In terms of containers, the largest container is the stage. The stage contains the scene contains all the panes contain all the nodes. What if I did, let's do 1,000. Oops, gotta get rid of this. Oh no, there's no circle. Well, look where I did. I put it over here at 1,000. Whoops, there's it over there. I better find it. There it is. It's there. I just made it off screen. By the way, that is a cheap trick you can use if you're doing some games where things might, where like you kill a zombie. You don't have to kill the zombie. Just move it off screen. You know the old missile defense game where missiles come in from the top of the screen and you have to, protect the cities? About 3 years ago, a student was doing that, and that worked out to a really nice solution. He basically kept all his missiles above the window. And then when they got activated to attack, he would just let them drop in. And when they got, quote, killed, he would just put them back up in above the window and call them inactive. And so he had like basically an array of 10 missiles. He didn't have to keep creating and deleting missile objects. When I say play with this stuff, that's what I mean. What about I'm going to make it -30. Same trick's going to happen, right? The problem here is if I put it too far to the left, I can't ever see it. Can't find my... There it is. Oh, there it is. See, it's partway off to the left. So just play around with these things. Oh, by the way, what if I say radius is -50? What do you think? Error? Compiles. Yeah, there it is. There's my circle with -50. Yes, anything can become a button. Yeah. How? I don't know. You can set the same thing. The circle will have a set on mouse over, set on drag, set on, and also set on press. And actually, we'll have examples of that. When we get into interaction, we will have examples of that. But instead of having, let me think. Yeah, there's an explicit example where a circle serves as a button, and also where the pane serves as a button. So if you click anywhere in the pane, something can happen. All of these nodes can become buttons, basically. Yeah. I need to fix this, or next semester I'll wonder why this isn't working. Okay. The same thing for show line and show text, same idea. I won't run the code for this, but here I create 2 lines, so line 1, line 2. And again, if I was really doing this in a real environment, I would name the lines based on what their job is, And then for each individual element, the constructors might be a little bit different. So line with 4 numbers after it, that's going to be beginning X location, beginning Y location, end X location, end Y location. And once you create these, we'll talk about how to do animations later. You can have animations where you start moving those things around, and the animation will show the lines, growing and shrinking and moving around on the screen. Yeah, I'll show it. Okay, so that shows the first line, which is black, is at 10, 50, and 390, 50. Now the Y coordinates are both 50, so this is 50 pixels down from the top. It starts at 10, it goes at 390. Why did I pick 10 and 390? Well, my X dimension is 400, completely arbitrary, so I just made it 10 pixels from either side. And this is why you can spend a lot of time with your GUI. By the way, not a great way to do this if you really rely on this kind of math. Oh, that looks so nice, and then people screw up your beautiful thing by changing the size of the window. Yes, you can make it where windows cannot be changed, where the size of the windows cannot be changed. That's a toggle where you set the value I think it's sizable true, sizable false, or set sizable true, set sizable false, that kind of thing. So yes, you can stop that. But there's other ways that we'll talk about later where you actually can have the line based on the size of the window itself. And then this one, I just tried to make it 45 degrees. So 40, 70, let's see. In the X direction, I went from 40 to 250, that's 210 pixels. So in the Y direction, I went from 70 to 280, which is 210 pixels. So it starts here at 40, 70, and then goes 210 pixels over, 210 pixels down, and ends up at 70, 280. As you start to lay out your elements, you'll see and we'll do examples both this week and next week. As you start to lay things out, you have to be careful about where you put them. And that's why I say you should draw it out on a piece of paper first, have a good notional idea of what you're trying to do before you actually start coding. What was odd about this one? Look at the import statements, and sometimes applications nothing too odd there. All right, I'm going to stop here because both lectures got this far, and then we'll pick up on doing more of these on Wednesday. And the more important stuff on Wednesday will just be showing the different behaviors of the different panes. And again, watching me go through this code is number one, admittedly boring as heck, and number two, the best way for you to learn is to just, by all means, take the code. It's up there. It's in a zip file. This code, FX1 through 7, is up there, and play with it yourself and try to make your own things. Try to make your own designs and see what works and what doesn't. This week, we're just going to get to here's how you put stuff up there. And then next week, we're going to get to how do you start to do some interaction. And then the week after that, I think we're going to do actual animations, which many of you are doing games. So animation is going to be an important thing. Okay. Any questions before we go? Always good to see you guys.